Before I go to what changes, I would like to spend a few seconds on what should not change, because that is as important. I think fundamentally being the voice of customer, listening to customers and responding in a very smart, agile manner to what customers are seeking is something that should not change regardless of the nature of the company. It's dependent not on the stage of the company, but on the stage of consumer category evolution. In other words, what is the penetration of the category? How well do consumers understand the category? Or is there a role of explaining the category to consumers first? Where does the category lie? What are the different customer segments? How well do they understand the category? How frequently do they transact? What are their dissonances? All these aspects of basically the what I call as customer category dynamics move from startup to scaled up and from scaled up to mature orgs. I feel that when you are an established company, you have more processes and therefore you have lesser chance of making massive debacles or mistakes. Sometimes the processes can invite a bit of red tape also, can inhibit innovations, can expand the time taken to plan and reduce the time taken to act. So I frequently call that phase as think, do, think. So you spend a lot of time in thinking, then you do, and then you again think, and then you do. But a bulk of the time goes in thinking and planning. Depending on which category and consumer segment you're playing with, you may have more budgets. You may have less room for failure, less appetite for risk. If you're a very early stage company, it's all reverse. You don't know much, you haven't scaled up, you don't have evidence to fall back upon. Blitz scaling is the need of the hour. So you're actually doing the reverse. Instead of think, do, think, you're do, think, do. So you're acting, then you're thinking, then you're acting. As opposed to doing one thing right for 99% of the time in a scaled up company, you're doing 99 things here, each with 1%, with a hope that 2 or 3 will really scale up. It's the trial and error mode. You execute fast, you fail fast, you learn, you keep moving up. The risk appetite is very high. The reward equation is also equally high. I mean, I wouldn't have seen a 50x traffic jump in Unilever, right? Had I been in Unilever, which I saw in Flipkart. Equally, things going wrong in Flipkart would have meant that it would not have become 50x, it would have become 0x. 80% of the role is category consumer dynamics that doesn't change. And success actually depends on that. What changes is actually the mindset of the marketer, because you pivot from a more process-driven, more roadmap-driven, more planning-driven construct in your mind to a more embracing change, embracing pivots, ambiguity, to a more action-driven environment. But both of these are built on the premise of the category consumer dynamics. If you don't do what is right for your consumers in the context of the category, no matter what you do, you will not succeed. The first thing I would ask is, are you a nascent brand or are you a mature brand in a nascent category or a mature category? Because if you are a new brand in a mature category, like for instance, if an e-commerce player enters now, it's already a mature category in India, but 10 years back it wasn't. The approach will be different, right? Versus if you are a new brand entering a new category, no one has done that, then your approach will be different. Fundamentally, what happens is if consumers know the category, then your task as a marketeer is to make them aware of your brand. But if the consumers don't know the category, then your task as a marketeer is to educate the consumers about the category to begin. So I'll perhaps take these two different examples and just go about the answer. So let us say that you're a new brand in an established category and people understand the category and you basically want to create consumer awareness about your brand. I think the right journey for brands to do is to first ascertain the question, do I have a good product? Remember, going back to the previous experience, that there is no point in starting to build a brand if you don't have a good product. So the beginning of that is, do you have a good product compared to the other competitors? If the answer is yes, start with performance marketing. Again, depending on whether you're a web-based or an app-based activity, you will do app-based retargeting or install campaigns through Criteo, Facebook. If you are a web-based activity, you would do a lot of SEO, you would do a lot of affiliate marketing, you would do a lot of performance display ads, etc. So that's the typical way to start with. And while this gives you performance marketing, I would advise such teams to also start seeding a little bit of a spend on social media through content marketing. Today, consumers tend to interact a lot with brands who have intelligent, smart, contextual, and consumer-facing content marketing. So, difference between content marketing and advertising is in advertising, the product and the business that you're selling is at the center of it. Basically, your story is woven around the fact that look, I am great, so come and buy me. Whereas in content marketing, it is rooted around the consumer context. So you basically say that consumers have this context, and by the by, in that context, this is how the product fits in. So an example of advertising will be a toy is available at so and so price with so and so features. An example of content marketing will be 9 ways to be a better parent, out of which 1 out of the points will be on that toy. So I think for an early stage brand, I would say that have a mix of content marketing and performance marketing to begin with. Gradually, when you have started seeing better engagement performances on social media, gradually you start doing CPM buys, which is salience marketing on digital, on YouTube, on Instagram, depending on where your TG lies. And then after a point in time where the business has scaled up a little bit, your DAU, MAU ratios have improved, your retention funnels have improved, you are getting business both from acquisition and retention. That is where you can gradually go to television marketing or offline marketing, and that too in bursts. So maybe you start with a 2-week campaign for a couple of crores and then gradually scale it up to a big campaign like a 4-week campaign for $1 million or $2 million. So that I would say is the process, let's say, for a established category new entrant. For a new category new entrant, I think first 18 months would almost entirely be built on content marketing, where you're essentially telling people the importance of good parenting, importance of good planning for a good vacation, importance of education, or whatever you're trying to educate consumers about the importance of the category. And that is the primary focus of your website, of your assets. So there has to be a massive role of content in-house as well as in social media, followed by performance marketing, followed by salience digital marketing, right? That's the order. But content marketing on social media plays an incredibly important role, especially if you're trying to educate people. And I'm making an assumption that all these questions are for digitally native brands. The first set of marketeers I would hire for such teams would be content marketers. This whole idea of, financial planning. In India, it's still an alien concept beyond maybe 5 or 10 million people. You need great content marketeers to be able to educate and explain people the importance of financial planning in today's life. And that would be the first set of people that I would hire in the team if the context is like that. If in the eyes of the consumer, 2 categories are fungible, then branded house is a better approach. Because you're fundamentally making one brand. You don't have to manage multiple brands. Multiple brands means multiple brand cores, multiple brand assets. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of economics. It's not the same set of customers, even if it's the same company. So house of brands is more difficult than branded house. But it's important that the categories have to be fungible. So in the eyes of the consumer, I should be okay in buying television from a brand from whom I bought my mobile phone earlier. That's the definition of fungible categories in the eyes of the consumer. And this is exactly the kind of question that gets covered in the category consumer dynamics that I spoke about 2 minutes ago. What happens in the case of food, and I will perhaps take a liberty to digress for a few seconds and draw an analogy from art. If you think in art, where people tend to consume a product both in its functionality and with emotion, a piece of art evokes an emotion and also charges a price. So there is a functionality and there is an emotive aspect. In cases of art, both the artist and the art are important. That's why you remember a singer as well as the song. And typically what happens is the moment the artist and the art both are important, you tend to, in your mind as consumers, say that, this belongs to this domain. So this kind of a song is associated with this kind of a singer. This kind of a movie is associated with this kind of a director. So such and such is an action hero. And we believe all categories which have a blend of art actually fit into like this, where the brand gets categorized and tends to become less fungible. Food is like that. We often say that you first eat with your eyes, then you eat with your hands. Chefs say that पहले आप दिल से खाना बनाते हो, उसके बाद हाथ से खाना बनाते हो. There is an art associated in food. And that is why categories in food are not fungible, which is why it's a bit difficult, not impossible, bit difficult to imagine the same brand being an aspirational destination for a biryani as well as a burger. That is why biryani has a destination, pizza has a destination, Coffee has a destination. Of course, there is a role of fusion, but Behroo's will always be known as a biryani brand. Oven Story will always be known as a pizza brand. If you start mixing them up, like if you have Behroo's biryani, then Behroo's pizza, then Behroo's meals, and then you have Behroo's desserts, it will not work. Marketers have to decide whether your categories in the eyes of the consumers are fungible. That's where you opt for a branded house, which is the easier route. Else you fall back onto house of brands. Platforms can also do it, because platforms, so ultimately you're aggregating. You could do a Flipkart Big Billion Day or a Flipkart Fashion and stuff like that. But wherever brands have the connotation of art and the emotive context, I think that's where, in my mind, in art, the artist is as important as the art. A chef is as important as the food. I need to believe that you are a true destination of biryani. Only then I will buy for it. If you start selling biryani and burgers and beer, I think the association gets diluted. The approach largely remains same for all categories where differentiation is difficult to achieve. Fintech is one example. Any category which is either governed by innovation challenges or regulatory framework or some kind of a macro context that inhibits innovation tends to become commoditized over a period of time, and you don't have scope for differentiation. So the way I look at it, I think there are three axes to make a brand stand out. The first axis is obviously a differentiated product, which in this case doesn't apply. The second axis is to provide a differentiated economic value. And by that, I don't necessarily mean cheapest, but I mean the cheapest price point, but I mean that you provide the maximum value for a given price point. And a lot of people tend to do that, but that's not sustainable over a 5-year period because it puts a lot of pressure on business P&Ls. And the third route is to become the most popular. So the best product, the best value, and the best popularity. By that, I mean is that in your category, consumers hear about from you or from fellow consumers the most. And to me, the best way to build a fintech brand, provided, of course, the first thing is that do you have a level playing product? If your product is lesser than someone else, then this is not the right approach. You have to be at least equal. In the war of equals, salience plays a very, very big role. Because the guy who becomes the most popular first amongst the equals is the person who sort of starts grabbing people, getting people to gravitate towards them. Now, salience happens in two ways. One, you find a way to talk about yourself. And second, you find a way to get a small set of customers to talk about you. So basically, people get to hear more about you amongst the set of equals, either directly from the brand or from fellow consumers, through your content marketing, social media, viral activities, and stuff like that. That is what I would suggest for all categories where differentiation in the product is difficult to achieve or has not happened, where innovations have got stifled. If the category is new, then creating the category is salience. You are not creating salience for the brand. You're creating salience for the category first. If I do not know about financial planning, then your first task as a marketeer is to create salience for financial plan. In that case, the salience of the brand and the salience of the category merge with each other. We understand the difference between loyalty and loyalty programs. Sometimes we get confused with it. You don't need a program to create loyalty. Equally, a program often does not fetch a loyalty either. To me, I think loyalty happens when you have given a solution to the consumer, then the consumer can't live without or look beyond. And therefore, it becomes a part of your habit. Like, for instance, I would say WhatsApp is a habit, at least for me. But large majority of products that we have do not get into that habit loop, but many of them run programs. So let's pivot the question, answering what does a loyalty program do when the habit is formed and when the habit is not formed. When the habit is formed, the role of the loyalty program is to reward the habit and create absolute consumer delight. It's a bit like, imagine every day you get up and you get a certain coin or points or incentive for reading the newspaper. It's an absolute customer delight. You have a habit and you're getting rewarded for the habit. And therefore the habit loop becomes stronger. In the case where the habit is not formed, unfortunately, loyalty programs end up creating an artificial incentive which locks you in. So you make a commitment, either time commitment or monetary commitment, and you say, because I have put in this subscription fee, I need to stick to this platform, otherwise I will lose out. So in a way, this loyalty program is not creating any kind of stickiness. It is binding you in. And if the consumer gets a better choice at some stage, the consumer will move there. And this is a fine balance. And to me, this is the question to be asked. Is your loyalty program creating loyalty or rewarding forming habit, or is your loyalty program creating an artificial lock-in which is not allowing the consumer to escape? And fundamentally, you have the answer if you look at it like this, because the latter is never beneficial. It's not customer first, it's business first. What we saw in Flipkart, in general, and I'm not saying there are no exceptions, but in general, when you take a subscription route, you do the latter. Because anyone can pay the subscription fee and come, regardless of whether it's my first usage or whether it's my 100th usage. In other words, you are a part of the program even if you have not completed the habit loop. And then what happens is, if your habit loop is not there, but you have paid the subscription fee, you sort of feel locked in. And if in course of the tenure of the program, if the habit doesn't form, you exit. So the program doesn't really act as a loyalty program. It acts as a lock-in program. And that is why we say that let's look at customers who on a variety of parameters had been loyal to us, had been sticky with us, etc., etc. And let's enroll them into the program without any further effort. In other words, people who were a part of the Flipkart Plus program had already crossed the threshold of the habit loop. And what we were telling them is that now that Flipkart is a habit, here is the reward for your habit. To me, that was a very important and critical learning. The second learning, which I think is slightly tactical in nature, is that a lot of time is spent on ensuring how the consumer enters the program, like the subscription fee, like the amount of points or whatever currency you earn. But I have often seen that many loyalty programs don't spend an equivalent amount of time in telling the consumers how the consumers will redeem the currency that they earn, make value of the subscription fee that they have put in. And that is why we focused more on the redeem part, where consumers were given a wide plethora of choice, where they could actually burn their points. If you think of it from the customer point of view, again, think customer first at every stage. The customer extracts the benefit, gets the reward if you can burn the point that you have earned. Without that, it's just vanity. And in this regard, we got another insight that the best way to make people redeem the points is not just give third-party benefit. It is to allow them to redeem the points in their next bill, on the bill. It's almost like a discount coupon if it's economic value, or add another product with that value. So in other words, loyalty program should be viewed from the point of view of rewarding people who have crossed the habit loop. Loyalty programs should be simple enough, and they should focus on both the earn as well as the redemption part. And the redemption should be as versatile and as convenient for the consumer as possible, so that the redemption rate goes up. A lot of companies use this concept of earn versus burn, because a lot of people will earn coins and not burn them because there aren't enough redemption options. And the difference between the two is an economic arbitrage. That's a wrong customer way of thinking. If you think customer first, you would want every customer to burn their coins, because that's where they get the benefit. That's where true rewarding the habit loop happens. I think those were some of the learnings that we picked up. A yes and a no. Obviously, D2C gives a lot of advantage to companies because you control the whole funnel, and then you are listening directly to consumers, and you have the opportunity to change, fine-tune your product to give customized solutions. But equally at the same time, you have to spend disproportionately to get the footfalls in. And that means that you're catering to a smaller set of users. So you may be having the full control on the funnel, but the size of the funnel is small. Whereas if you go with aggregator partners, the funnel expands. And if there is a way in which you can still deliver customer experience, you may not know at a product ID level, which is what aggregators don't share with you. But if you fundamentally understand that in your product, speed is a problem, value is a problem, packaging is a problem, reliability is a problem, the large themes, and you can sort of work on them to improve the customer experience, then I don't think D2C brands are at any disadvantage, even if 50% or more contribution is coming from aggregators, because you're fundamentally catering to a larger user pool. And the larger is the user pool that you're catering to, the greater is the salience of your brand. And hence, there is a higher probability for you to improve the footfall on your brand assets as well. Customer experience first, and followed by long-term results, followed by short-term results. Yes, in a 100% D2C approach, you have greater control. But because you are getting an opportunity to serve more customers, you're getting an access to more number of problems, and hence an opportunity to solve more problems and delight more cohorts. That to me is better customer insight. Unless, of course, you're 100% data dark. You don't get anything and you have no option to work. which no aggregator does. No aggregator will want that also. If you look at India in the last 20 years, the 2000s perhaps was the year of telecom and 2010s was perhaps the year of e-commerce. I think 2020s will be the year of D2C brands and service marketplace. So I see the number of D2C brands across category segments exploding in a massive, massive way. Right? We are already seeing with Wow Skincare, Mama, Delicious, a lot of these really good examples, Rebel Foods. And then there will be some brands which will rely on a Thrasio kind of an exit to take them from 0 to 1 scale to a 1 to 10. So I see a good opportunity in this. Only catch I feel in India with respect to US is that if you look at in the Western market, people are a lot more open to pay a premium for a brand's position. So Tesla stands for something and I'm willing to pay a premium for that position. Nike stands for something and I'm willing to pay a premium for its position. In India, that tendency is not there. That inclination is not there with consumers beyond a certain small segment of people, maybe a 10 million pop straight up. So brands with the ambition of scale have to find the balance between value and proposition. That's not so easy. And that requires experts, right? It is not a algorithmic replicable model like what Thrasio does from one category to the other and builds it up. Also, if you see what Thrasio does is they pick categories which are completely functional in nature, like a spoon or a stainless steel. They have been the same product for whatever, I don't know, 50 years or 70 years or whatever, right? In India, these categories will not make you money because it's a very value-driven category. In India, the D2C brands will come up in segments like baby care, beauty, in fashion, which are expressive categories. The codes to build these categories are building an aspirational proposition. But because India is very value-driven, people are not willing to pay a premium for the proposition. And as a result, the art of converting these from product to brand is not going to be easy in India. But the macro context of large number of D2C brands coming up is going to be there. So I think firstly, it is an understatement that culture is very, very, very important. If you think about it, law and order in any country determines what is allowed and what is not allowed. But culture tells us what should be done. If you think about it, in no penal code will you find that wearing shoes into a temple is an offense. Penal code is law, but taking your shoes out as you enter a temple is a part of our cultural tradition. That tells what is the definition of an ideal behavior. It doesn't have to invite a penalty. Not following the law, not abiding the law is tantamount to inviting a penalty. But not abiding by the cultural traits is behaving in a manner that is not ideal. And every organization, like every society, like every family, has to have a clear definition of what is an ideal behavior. Because without that, we don't coexist. We don't cooperate. We don't collaborate. And that is why culture is very, very, very important. In my experience, I have seen two kind of instances to it. One is organizations sometimes don't focus on it at all because culture, like many other things, like a good technology code, like a good brand building journey, does not show up on P&L this week or this month. It shows up over a period of time, and when it shows up in a bad way, it invites death very, very suddenly. And that is why some companies sometimes don't focus on it. But I have also seen the other side of it, which is sometimes companies over-focus. They hardwire it, they define it in such a way that the culture ends up becoming rigid. To me, it's very important that not only culture has to be given its importance, it also has to be simple that it can be understood by people, and it has to be flexible. It cannot be stuck in time. If you are stuck in time, then you will never be able to attract both new and old talent equally. Like if I were to give you an example of countries like US and a country like Japan. Both have very strong cultures, but one is flexible, one is inclusive, one accommodates diversity. And because it accommodates diversity, it leverages the global talent. The other is perhaps very, very, very strong, very clear, without a shade of doubt, but not as old. And therefore, to me, I think any cultural aspect has to be built on A, simplicity, and B, flexibility. Culture should be like, we are proud of where we are, but do join us and make us better. Rather than saying, this is Rome, you have to act like Romans. And this is the second example where people overanalyze culture write values in a value workshop, spending 2 days in a beautiful 5-star resort, and then become married to it and don't change it. That doesn't work either. Now, to your other part, I think what we try to do, or at least in my mind, I believe are some of the right tenets defining and following culture. The first one will be hire right. In general, I have seen if you hire on IQ, you invariably get it wrong. So that's why my principle is to hire on EQ, hire on attitude, hire on learnability, hire on ability to unlearn and learn at a threshold IQ. Second is onboard people well. And this is particularly important in the COVID time where people are working remote. So at Rebel, we take considerable effort to onboard people well. The first 100 days is with the HR function that we like to call as the people function. And in fact, we measure 30-day NPS scores, 60-day NPS scores, 90-day NPS scores of employees. Generally, the opinion that an employee carries in the first 100 days determines 75% of their experience. The third aspect that we do is get alignment on few but well-chosen goals and values. If you have too many goals and too many values, people get confused. And the fourth thing that we do is empower them, get out of the way. There's no point in hiring good people, landing them well, and then micromanage. So if you do these things and define your culture on the principle of flexibility and simplicity and give it its right importance, I think one will have a very, very strong cultural fabric. It's very similar, right? Like, for instance, the equivalent of walking into the temple with a shoe in a family would be not showing respect to an elder. If you don't do that, you don't get the ultimate punishment, which is the criminal punishment of being terminated from the organization, being thrown out from the family, etc., etc. But it does definitely have an impact, and it needs to have an impact. It needs to have an impact on the way the organization sees you, your velocity of promotion in the organization, your economic benefit that you get from the organization, you getting the hot roles or the coveted roles. All of these things get impact. Fundamentally, one needs to, if you look at the equivalent of the society example that I gave, every organization will have policies like ethics policy and stuff like that. When you violate it, you violate law. And then the capital punishment comes, or the ultimate punishment comes. But when you violate culture, maybe the ultimate punishment does not come. It starts with a warning. It starts impacting your career progression. It starts the way people look at your talent density score, your placement in the org with respect to your peers, etc. And over a period of time, it does not change. Then it tantamounts to the ultimate punishment. That's the way it happens. But culture, unlike law, allows people to learn and get closer to compliance, rather than a singular instance of non-compliance leading to termination. Because culture by definition is meant to be accommodative. We want you to abide by it. We are not enforcing it.